Well, my name's Margaret Gosley, and I've been a member of the Mansfield and Sutton and Ashfield Observatory for just over a year. Well, I got involved because I've driven past it many times and just always wondered about it. But then I'm also a textile artist, and I wanted to make a banner of the night sky with 8 particular constellations on it because they were the 8 classes of my daughter's school in Tower Hamlets in London, which is called Halley School after Halley's Comet. And the classes are named after constellations, but I didn't know where they were in the night sky. So I thought, well, those people will know. So I stopped off at the observatory, and they did indeed know. And they were wonderful, terrifically helpful, and they gave me a map and to show where they all were to take away, and that solved that problem, and I was so impressed with how helpful they were and how interesting it was that I went to their next open day. They have almost every month, at the end of the month, they have an open day, and I went and loved every minute of it, although I know very little about any of it. So I started to go, and I started to go to their talk. They have occasional talks, either by a member giving a talk on something related to the nights to astronomy, or they have invited speakers as well. And I started to learn really, and I started to talk to the other members who are so knowledgeable and so giving of their knowledge, that it fascinated me. And I'm a words person because I also write poetry as well as being a bit of a textile artist. I write, and I write poetry. I would go to their talks and not understand about 2/3 of it, but a line would stand out, and I would scribble it down in my notebook and drive home and couldn't leave it alone, and put it on a piece of paper, and over the weeks it would turn into a poem because that was my way of understanding that that concept, really. I'm a show off, and I told them about the poems I was writing. They asked me to do one, and they said, "Why don't we?" They, the observatory has a monthly um, digital newsletter, and they said we could put it in the newsletter. Why don't you? So I send them a poem not every month, but quite often, and they put it in their newsletter. And it's a poem related to stuff I learn at the observatory. Yes. Well, for instance, one of the poems, I went to one talk, and in the context of that talk, somebody talked about the Oort cloud, Oort cloud, and I had no idea that what the Oort cloud was or that such a thing existed. But they had explained it more or less. But although it was in passing, really, the talk wasn't about that, but they happened to mention it. So it stayed in my head, this word, as much as anything, Oort, which is named after a man, actually. They're all named after men, I'm afraid. Um, and so I came home and I looked up the Oort cloud, and I found that it's right on the outer edges of our solar system where the sun's light begins, where we start to lose it, where it starts to fade. And it encompasses our solar system, really. And a poet in me found that magical, and I could understand it. And I thought about Dante's 9 circles, because the poet Dante talks about the 9 circles of of hell, actually. Um, and so um, I thought, well, maybe that's one of the Dante circles, and maybe. And I've always believed. I believe in the soul, and I thought, maybe when we die, that's because I'd always thought we die and our soul is released. That's where all the souls go. Because it's like children say, well, if we all go to heaven, heaven must be very big. All the people go? The same in Islam and paradise. If you go to paradise, where do all the people go? And I thought maybe that's where they are. That's what the Oort cloud is. It's where all the souls go. And I'd also learnt from this talk that it is where the comets come from the Oort cloud. And I thought, well, maybe the comets are where the souls are not quite ready to settle. And so they get cast out and they zoom around until they are ready to settle. And that was my way of understanding it. And so I wrote a poem called The Oort Clouds. They did start off as steam, and then they took the A out. And I was very sad about that, and quite a few people were sad about that. And I feel that, we are brought up to think on the one hand there's science, and on the other hand there's art. And never that, when I was at school, you either went onto the science side of the school or you went onto the arts side when you did if you did A levels, or you went and did technology. And they were seen as distinct, but they are not my own feeling is they are not distinct. That number one, they overlap, but also I think they interact as well. And science can't rely on inspiration. Neither can art, And so I thought a lot about it, and I thought, no, art still remains in the STEM, should still be in STEM. So this was my writing really about it, that I took that acronym STEM. So we have science, yes, and science comes from when we look at the natural world. We look at the natural world and we wonder about it. We look at the stars, we wonder about it. We look at the rocks, we wonder about them. We look at plant life and we wonder about it. And then and it's wonder. It starts with wonder. And then we look closer, and because we want to know more about it, and we write down what we have seen, or we capture it in photographs, or we devise schemes of numbers to record the wonder, really. We are recording our wonder in particular ways, and it's a way of finding out, just as I wrote that poem to find out about the Oort Club, what it meant for me. Science comes from wondering about what it means. It starts, if we go back to Leonardo da Vinci, he was a scientist and he was an artist, and it came from his wondering. If you look at some of his technical drawings, they are fantastic. So we have science and wonderments. And then because we want to find out about more, and we want to record our wondering, to find out, we develop technologies, which is ST, which is the T of the STEM. And we have technology. And technology is involved in art as much as it is in science, yes? We invent technologies, we invent telescopes, we invent paints and machines, sewing machines, we invent technologies that help us to express what we have found out and what we think and what we wonder about. And the technology, in order to invent something and make it real, you have to be an engineer. I always say that I'm a textile artist, and they are as much engineers as people that build jet engines. You have to make it work. And the planning and the drawing and the making it work involves an aesthetic. You open a watch, an analog watch, and you look at the wonderful gears, and they have to look right to work right. Otherwise, they won't work right. So there's an aesthetic. There are a lot of artists that do wonderful things with maths, and maths is there in nature. We look at the cauliflower, and you see Fibonacci sequence. There were lots of poets that used the form of Fibonacci to write poetry, and they use it as a structure. I think it was reductive. Keeping it in, I think, is important. And most technology and scientific people I have talked to believe the same thing, actually. Son in Ashfield is sort of halfway between Nottingham and, I don't know, Sheffield. Or it's kind of a nothing area, isn't it? I mean, it was a mining. It was life and blood was mining, and now it's for years since the 80s. It's been neglected, and also the observatory is there because of the passion of the men and some women who built it, and they built it brick by brick and scaffolding pole by scaffolding pole, and they built it from reclaimed materials that they got from mines that were closing down. You know, the base of the observatory was built with bricks from the Pilsley mine canteen. You know, it's that kind of commitment and enthusiasm and passion. And and there it sits on the outskirts of Sutton and Ashfield. And I think it will do good things for the area. People are inspired by the great out there, aren't they? And to actually see it, and to see it through telescopes, even if it's just looking. I mean, the last time I went, um, the only thing that was available to see was the sun, but they got telescopes where you could look at the sun, and it's breathtaking. And then their talks. I mean, I didn't know there were thousands of galaxies. I didn't know there was all that space. And it's just extraordinary and very, very beautiful. And then the science of it, the size and the numbers that are involved, it's beyond our understanding. As well as having the telescope, they have a radio astronomy outfit. It's actually just contained in an old container, um, and and that again is the idea that these slender aerials just sitting up there in the sky are receiving information. They talk to Europe, they connect with Europe, and they're receiving information. And this idea that we have we as human beings live in this narrow space that we can see and we can hear. But there's another whole space that we can't see and we can't hear. But radio astronomy hears it and sees it. And we have to translate that hearing and seeing so that we can understand it. And it's just that idea that there's all that, it's not just all those galaxies and stars and black holes and space out there. There's information. It's very excited by the radio astronomy thing, which again is not really my thing. It was computer. When I went to a talk about the radio astronomy, and it's very hard for someone like me to understand it, and it's not much keen at staring at white lights on blue screens, but it's the idea that that's information that's out there. Just amazing.